Hey, everybody, welcome to another Practical Pet Business Chat. This one's a good one. This one, I mean, they're all good, right, Lorin? They're all
Well,
good.
we hope so.
We hope so. But this is that starting point that I have with a lot of folks in the business. Give me that 10,000-foot view of your business. And I have to say, some people nail it. Others, I find myself having to dredge up some of the other things. And I know as we go down, to 10,000 to 5,000 to 2,000, we're getting deeper. But I am surprised. So when they're asking me for advice and, hey, this just doesn't seem to be working out the way I thought it was, I find myself going back to, well, your 10,000-foot level is just so narrow. Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. And also, let's at the same time while we're doing this, broaden that 10,000-foot level for you.
So give an example of what you mean.
Yeah, so they'll say, "Gosh, I sell this product for X dollar. I pay X dollar, so I should be making, $10 off of every one of these." I'm like, "Okay, it's a good 10,000-foot level. Why aren't you?" Well, I don't know because, I think it's my profit margin needs to be better, and I've got to go back to the distributor or the manufacturer and negotiate better. And I'm like, "Okay, what are you going to negotiate it for?" Well, just better. I got to do better than the $10. And I'm like, okay, but what are the factors
What are you
that
in
are
it for?
that are eating away? Because you at least know you're getting the $10, but what's eating away at that $10?
So that's the issue that a lot of people don't take into account. You're right. There, when you talk to retailers, a lot of times, or distributors, even manufacturers, sometimes they'll talk about the value of the product in terms of keystone pricing, or X percentage of margin, and that sounds great. It's like, oh, I'm paying $20. I'm selling it for 40. I'm making $20.
Yeah,
Are you making $20? Because there's all the overhead and everything else. And where I saw a lot of that was in frozen food, because a lot of stores are like, well, I need to charge more for my frozen food. So you're offering a better product, and you're going to make it even more expensive because you've got the overhead of the freezers. Is that what I'm understanding? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. You need to go back to your manufacturer and your distributor and negotiate a little better, because you have now gotten out of your lineup of how you price structure your goods, and you've taken an already elite category and you've priced it now at even more of an elite pricing, when really what you should be doing is figuring in, how much more does it cost me to run these freezers? What kind of value am I getting back? Talk to the manufacturer and the distributor for that. Does it result in, more customers, better customers, more consistent customers? This is the only place they can buy it. Does it result in additional sales of items because they're getting this product? There's all of that to look at, along with your overhead, your employee costs, your rent, your taxes, your operational costs, all of that. Everything has to be figured into it, because every bit of it is a bite out of that elephant profit. So now the $20 you thought you were making is really only $6.72. So, and that's fine if volume comes into play. But it's the same thing we talked about before. One of the reasons, I got rid of beds was because their turn rate was so slow, and I couldn't compete with a big box store that was getting it in at a severe markdown, from the different manufacturers to blow it out. I couldn't even get it at cost for what they were selling it at retail. So I looked at that and I said, so I have this amount of space in my store, this amount of footprint, that essentially makes me no money
right.
because I can't turn product in it. So I'm an idiot. I've been having this bed space here for 10 years. Thank God this discount place opened up because it forced me to take a look at it and go, this is stupid. This is illogical. I don't sell enough of these in my location, in my store, in my area, with the amount of competition, whatever the factors are. It doesn't make any sense. Let me turn that into something that makes me money. And so I completely removed that section and I turned it into something that made money. It's the same thing with dishware for me. In other places may be completely different, but dishware and beds and things that didn't have that turnover, while they made better margin, they cost me more money in the long run because they ate up whatever extra perceived margin I had in lack of turnover. Where other items that had considerably perceived considerably less margin because of the volume of turn rate. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's all day
And
long.
yeah, and I think a couple of things there I want to unpack. I experience this so often where, but it's always been a part of our, this is, I've got a core, and if you're not going back and revisiting on a semi-regular basis, you also get in that thinking of, I have to have the beds because
I always
I
have.
always have them. Yeah. And oh my gosh, because everybody can point to one or two customers that absolutely, and it's like, okay, cool. Have something special for them, but don't devote that amount of space, because what's that amount of space? That's the question. I love that you said that, because that's the question that, as I'm saying, expand yourself out in your understanding and your scope. What is that space? What do you need that space to generate for you? It's the same thing when I talk to manufacturers, and the vendors will say to me, "Oh yeah, we're going to have a trial size," and I'm like, "Okay, don't you already have a trial size of that?" "Yeah, we've had it for like 10 years." "Okay, things change, new pet parents coming in all the time, etc." But when I look at it, I can buy three or four of your trial size, which accounts for more than your first regular size offering for less money. Why wouldn't I do that? Consumers are pretty smart now. We've got all these tools, all these apps that will calculate it
Yep.
out, cost per unit, this and that. Well, I just buy four of these. Why wouldn't I? Oh yeah. Well, I'm like, wow, I just saved both of us a lot of time and money. Thank you very much. But you've got to be looking at that, because each one of these things, a slight tweak here and a slight tweak there, oftentimes is the difference between it being profitable and something you should look to sustain, and something that is costing you not just money, but resources, time, and opportunity, which frankly, quite often is much more damaging.
Well, a good
So
example of that is 5 pound large breed puppy. Doesn't matter who the brand is, right? It's like, I'm not paying for that. That's a
right.
sample size bag for a large breed puppy. 5 pounds isn't going to last more than a couple days, and you need a couple days to trial something anyway. So when manufacturers would push to get that placement on the shelf, it's like, I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
If you want to throw it in, and we'll use it as a trial size bag for large breed puppy customers. We won't say on there free, it'll have a position and it'll be priced. But it's like, that's insane for me to devote space, because no reasonable pet parent is going to see any value in that. There's not enough meals and it's really more expensive in that size of a bag. And yet I see it in so many stores. When you walk
Yes.
in, it's like, gosh, you devoted all that space. Let me go through and count how many brands you have. Let me go through and count how many large breed puppy spaces you have. And then I look at that and I think, what kind of a turn is that making for you? It's not. You're not selling. So if you took that amount of space and took all of that space from all of those bags, what else could you put there that would actually turn a profit for you? It's looking at, how do I max, and not everything is going to be the same, but if something doesn't move for you, it goes back to what you were saying when you said, people say, well, this has always been our footprint. This is always what we had. We're known for this. Really? When's the last time you sold one? So I've had this discussion not that long ago. And I said, so tell me the last time you sold these. I don't know. Okay, tell me how many you sell a month. I'm not sure. How many you sold in the last 6 months? A couple. Okay, we're done. We're done talking about this. You can see how this is not of any value to you. You're paying rent monthly on this, and this isn't even, a skosh of the amount that you are putting towards your rent, not to mention your operational costs. And just stepping back and realizing that you have to evolve. Your public is evolving, your consumer is evolving, their tastes are changing, they're learning more, they're being directed elsewhere, their attention span is changing, all of that. How can you think that staying exactly who you are or were is the right thing to do? You have to continue to go with that, predict it, get ahead of it, or at least simultaneously be rolling with it so that you stay relevant, so that you stay the focus, so that you still come to people's forefront of their minds when they're thinking about, oh, I should get some of that. Let me call up, this store that I always go to and see if they have it or something like that. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, do you? Yeah, come in and we'll talk about it, and come in and maybe you don't carry just that brand, but you've got it in another brand and they're not married to the brand. It's something they saw and they're asking about it. So you have to constantly be at that 10,000. It's so easy to be at the 1,000 foot level, right? You have to constantly be at that 10,000 foot level to constantly reevaluate your input versus your output in
Right.
terms of dollars.
Well, and two things you said there that stand out to me. Number
You
one,
actually listen to what I say? That's so
it's a
weird to
bad
me.
habit. I'm trying to break it. I'm trying to break it. But one of the things that we didn't hit on too in that discussion is breakage, spoilage, etc. Of you also got to factor that in. And I'm
Mhm.
surprised how often across the board, except maybe at the manufacturer level, that is not something that's taken into consideration. And with the increasing demand, want for, refrigerated, frozen, etc. foods, treats, different, add-ons, etc. I'll ask folks, so what are you going to do? What's your contingency plan? Power goes out. I live in California. You can't charge your electric car sometimes because you're going to break the grid, right? So, what are you going to do during those times? Oh, I don't know.
So I
That's a good.
had that issue.
I
I had
have I
that
have
issue.
coolers. I've got, and we'd run out and buy some ice. Excellent. Okay. Well, okay. What's it going to cost? What's your responsibility if that happens? And I've had some folks go, "That's why I have inventory insurance." Okay, good.
Or a generator or
Now
yep.
I've got, yeah. Now I've got you. Now you're thinking in the totality of those things. And it's the same thing. I mean, across the board, it's what if this one ingredient is not available and you're the manufacturer? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that?
Mhm.
What is your I know we need this to make these products. And you and I are seeing that right now. There are some brands right now that are unable to produce for a variety of reasons, and they can't get something, or the price of it has spiked, and they're trying not to pass the pricing impact on. So that's the one area. The second area that I see folks missing quite
Before
often.
you get off of that
Go
area,
ahead.
just as a retailer, if a brand wouldn't stand behind breakage or loss of something just in general day to day, that
Mhm.
it, that's probably not a brand you should be in business with because you're a partnership. So if something, a chub, for example, a frozen chub, the packaging ripped, I don't know a single brand I worked with that wouldn't replace that. It didn't happen very often, but they would replace it.
Well,
Um, But
and let me just point out, by the way, where I was talking about was not so much in the transport, the shipping, the
no,
handoff.
me either.
Okay, so that's really good. I would say I do know a number of um, products that do not come with that.
But you should
And so,
address that. They don't come with it.
yeah.
They don't. It's an individual thing. You
Okay,
know,
so that's a good call out though,
yeah,
right?
it's an individual thing where you have to say, so if I bring your brand in and packaging tears because I had a chub freezer that was a 6 foot long chub freezer, and people are pulling their chubs out and they jam them back in, and the little end of it has a metal clip on it and it tears a package next to it. So the brand would say that they'd come in every so often, they'll go, I'll replace that for you. And I'm like, that would be so awesome. And it's that partnership relationship. Yeah, I didn't even have to ask. They would just do that. Or you'd go to turn it in, or get rid of it or destroy it, or just be in conversation with a brand and they go, don't worry about it. I'll take care of that. Same thing on returns from customers and that kind of thing. But also to the freezer thing in California, 24 freezers in my store. Power went out locally because the city decided on a weekend that they were going to shut the electric down and do some work to update their electricity for 3 days straight. And I
Oh,
had 24 freezers. So I had to go and buy a lot of dry ice and completely pack those freezers. And that's an additional cost. Dry ice isn't cheap.
right. Yeah.
So what's
Wow.
your second point?
No, so my second point there too is there are products that need a lot of explanation. And that's a cost to you as a
Mm-hmm.
store. That's a cost to you as a brand. That's a cost to you as a distributor. And so I never see anyone, because I have asked this, and I rarely will use the never, but very, very few instances I can't really even think of any, but I'll give the benefit of the doubt, where folks will factor that into their cost of goods. Oh, I'm going to bring this in because it's I believe in it so much. That's great. You believe in it. Now, how are you delivering the story for that brand? Or if you're the brand, this is the best thing ever. And I'll be like, that's great. But this is an educational sale. You're going to have to educate everybody along the line here to really drive the sales of that product. And I will say that's one of the areas where it comes along in the vendor side where I've said, I'm not sure you're a retail product. You may be a direct to consumer product because of the amount of education and hands on coordination that your product is really going to need. And there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, I can point to a number of products like that have now grown over 5, 6, 7 years, where they are now known about, understood, and they're a perfect fit to now transition the opposite way from the direct to
Right.
consumer into these retail locations because now it won't just be sitting on shelves. I tell a lot of folks your goal should not be to get it into stores, especially with a consumable product. It should be to get into the bellies of the beings who will benefit from your product. We need this to be working with the body system of the pets, not sitting on a shelf somewhere.
No,
That's not enough.
but that also depends on the product too, because I will tell you from
100%.
firsthand experience that rarely does a product, and this is, there are exceptions, of course, like there is to everything, but rarely do the vast majority of the products that are in the marketplace get where they are without being built on the backs of independents. Independent retailers learn about the products and teach it to their staff and teach it to their clients more than in some cases the manufacturers do. So, then they take that, and this is where so many independents feel screwed, is, we do all of the create the buildup of the brand and create the following, and then next thing we know, they pulled the rug out from under us and they're in big box and these other things, or direct to consumer. And that's, we've spoken about this before, you almost have to change your mindset on that a little bit,
Yeah.
because everything is now fair game. But I also get it from having been in that position of, what the hell, man? nobody even knew anything about your product, before people like me talked about it. So I expect continued loyalty for that, and it's not that you can't go off in those other directions, but you need to take care of me, your independent retailer, because I built that for you, along
Right,
with all the other independent retailers that built that for you. So,
right.
a little bit of a different view on
No,
that.
no, it is. It is, and I think the other benefit of what you're talking about too is that is not a reason not to bring in new brands because they're going to leave at some point.
Right.
Because that's also you get a benefit as an independent retailer of being unique, being cutting edge, and that's an area where you have that opportunity to really show off that you are different than any other place you're going to walk into to get a pet product or a pet service. So it is. I love the synergistic cycle of that, and I love that you said, "Hey, we all have to adjust our thinking because things have changed, and there are just some parts of that where just going back to that 10,000 foot view level, it's not always about profit. In the end, profit drives the machine, but sometimes there's a benefit that someone will explain to me, and I'll go, as long as that's what your goal is with this particular thing, okay, I get it now. Now let's look to how do we position, and at what point are you revisiting your decision? Because if you're doing that and you're going to do that for 10 years, I'm not sure because that's valuable either shelf
Right.
space, that's value marketing resources being put, whatever it may be in what part of the chain you're in. But um, I do see that, and I'll just say some of these vendors that I've talked to where they're like, we're in 6,000 store. I'm like, that's great, but if it was super successful, you wouldn't be calling me about this and saying, hey,
Right.
how do we move it off the shelves and into, being
Well,
put into action?
placement is one thing and
Yeah,
sell through is another. But I also wouldn't agree with
under
if you had asked me back when you were my vendor, if you had asked me, am I figuring in the cost of education of the product? No, no, because I assume that to be every product in my store needs an education. Every product needs to be
and
talked
that's who
about
you
to my
were,
consumer. Yeah. So
and
my
that where
staff that
stores are.
right,
Yeah,
I built that into the fact that I knew when I hired people that that was going to be a cost, that that's an employee cost, and part of running a business. An operational cost. Where you have to draw a line, just because it makes me think of this. So I'm sort of
yeah,
stepping outside the boundaries here. It made me think when you brought that up about people who are passing on the cost of credit card processing,
oh sure.
or things like that. And I hate that. I can't tell you how much I hate that, because it's like, do you need a line item for that on the receipt? Do you need a call out that will specifically piss people off, that you're going to call it out on the thing? When, for as long as I can remember, and the pet industry wasn't my first business I owned, for as long as I can remember, the cost of doing business was what you built into your pricing, right?
Sure.
So that's what we're talking about, is that 10,000 foot view, right? So part of that 10,000 foot view is not taking something down to a 1,000 foot view for everybody's view that should stay in a 10,000 foot view. If your credit card processing is going up 1%, then you should have a price increase at some point. Do you do it across the board? That's up to you. Is the processing charges, depending on who you work through, vary quite a bit. But that's all in that 10,000 foot view of how you structure your pricing to begin with, not something you want to irritate people with. One of the places that I worked the last couple of years, we wanted a line item for tipping for groomers. The problem was the way that this particular company's software was set up in their POS system was that you could either have a line item for tipping or not have a line item for tipping, meaning that it was on every receipt. So every time the client would take a look at their totals before they gave you the card, it would say, "Did you want to leave a tip?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh no, we're not going to have that on there." No, because every retail client will be like, "What?" Because no, we don't tip for retail. So the staff was trained in a different way to ask clients that were grooming, "Did you want to leave a tip for your groomer, or are you good to go?" Kind of thing, before they ran the credit card. But all of that is that 10,000 foot level of, how are we going to address that? How are we going to figure that in? And how are we not going to call it out specifically to irritate the consumer? Consumers just want to come in, get what they want. They want to be happy. They want to leave and go home, and they don't want to have something going in the back of their head going, why are you calling out that if I give you a credit card, I'm going to get hit for that? You've always been hit when you paid with a credit card, right?
Right. Yeah. No,
So
it's such it's such an interesting, but yet it is more than ever the awareness that consumers have of it too, I think is a great point, because it's just everywhere these
it's
days.
everywhere.
It's just so, it is. It's such a great point. And there's another cost. Is it worth annoying them where they go, yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
it's
they're going to
funny.
go to the competitor who doesn't have the line item, because they're still doing it the same way. There's just no
It's,
line item.
yeah, it's funny you say that, because yeah, I was just thinking about that. I literally got donuts, not for myself, because I would never eat a donut or 12. But that was there. And I did not realize that. That's such a good call out. That's, I'm sure they don't mean that for a, $1.50 donut. Do you want a tip on that? But
Right.
they also do coffee and all these other things that they'll cater for. And I'm sure that's why they have it.
Or it's just
It's a
the
great
way their
call.
POS system is
Yeah,
built.
no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
And
that's
I've gotten
weird.
pushback from clients when I've said, "Yeah, don't do the call out." And they're like, "Well, we want people to know that if they pay by credit card, they're the only ones that are going to." I said, "So you're going to penalize them for whatever method they want to pay. You're going to penalize only them because they have a card, not the cash people.
Right.
Okay, we're only going to penalize the credit card people. Just, maybe you don't raise it if you got a 2% increase in your cost of processing. Maybe you raise it 1% across the board,
Right.
and don't, it just has to be something even. I mean, you need to think outside the box of only the 1,000 foot, because there's so much more involved in that. So I don't know.
Well, and
Business has
in
gotten more
particular,
complicated.
yeah, in particular too, because as we look at our business and where the world has adapted and moved
That,
towards,
yeah,
you can tap your phone, you can tap your key ring. I mean, there's just, hey, got my ring, has my info, my, Apple Watch, I can pay with my, it's, you know, there's a cost for convenience, and I think people understand that as well. So,
yeah,
what a great discussion. So you can see why we wanted to do this, folks. Um, there are things we didn't even get to touch on.
right.
Reach out, let us know how you're dealing with those things. Send us an email, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. As always, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.